Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for attending this panel. Just to be sure you're in the right panel, this is on Indigenous values. Maybe you're looking for someone who's not on stage, and you're thinking this might be the wrong panel because Kidlat Tahimik isn't here wearing his usual Indigenous garb. He's on his way back. He's coming, and he will be the third speaker for the panel. So I'd like to introduce the new order. The first speaker, before I introduce our speakers, let me introduce this panel. In this panel, we have a national artist, a scholar, an educator, and a curator and cultural manager. 3 different types of institutions represented by the people in the panel. They will discuss Indigenous values and spaces where they thrive across time. This conversation will cover the Filipino concepts of Kapwa, Bukas loob, and maalwang buhay. Maybe may I also beg the Filipinos in the crowd for the value of pakikisama. I ask a little bit of silence so that we could proceed. Yes, please. Konting pagtitiis. I know you're brimming with enthusiasm. Okay, but let's curb that a little. Okay, or you can move a little in farther away, and let's hold this space here. Okay. Okay. So this topic is about spaces, and sometimes you stake a claim on a space, right? It could be a town plaza, could be a museum, could be a gallery, could be a church, it could be the diaspora. Our popular Catholic piety and indigenous wisdom are all a manner of continuing resistance to one Western standard of modernity. Let us now hear our first speaker. I would like to introduce Zerrudo, an archivist and a cultural manager who currently holds the position of Executive Director of the Philippines National Commission for Culture and the Arts. A globally recognized expert, Dr. Zerrudo is an accredited ICOMOS World Heritage Evaluation Specialist, former UNESCO Commissioner for the Philippines, and a pioneer of cultural heritage mapping, with numerous heritage education and conservation projects across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause to Dr. Zerrudo.
Thank you, Nikki. So I'd like to greet our attendees to this module of the Frankfurt Book Messe. I hope that we can share some insights and thoughts on our indigenous values, primarily conditioned by certain spaces that we have created over time across space. So first slide, please.
Sir, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Is there anybody in our audience who would need translation? We have a gadget for it and we have translators. Anybody who needs translation to German, we would give you your gadget. Okay, so I think we're okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. So this very short presentation will provide you more or less how particular spaces, particular landscapes have conditioned some of our indigenous values here in the Philippines. Now, how are we going to work this out? I will try to share this theoretical framework of view from the point of view of a heritage worker, how heritage has been viewed over time. Then, when we look at this framework, we look at it in a way of how certain sites in the Philippines would be understood in its context. These various contexts eventually would form certain patterns in terms of motifs, dimensions, actors, leveling. And these 4 dimensions would more or less provide us ideas what values evolve out of these 4 patterns, no, that we call out from the sites and the landscapes that we are looking at. First slide. The title of this presentation is Worlding the Filipinos, Indigenous Values and Multi-Spaces. Next slide. If you look at the heritage movement across the millennium, the traditional approach had always been very static. You only look at the object. You only look at the site. But now, it has to be very dynamic. It's both the product and the process. How do you understand heritage? Before, it was only about the past. You put it in a museum. But when you look at the museum now, it's really a discussion, a conversation of the past, the present, the future. So it's really impressing to everybody that idea of intergenerational responsibility, that idea of sustainability has to be there. When you look at the traditional museum, it's always a point in time. Where's the object? What particular era is that object? But now, it's not a point in time. It's a line in time. You need 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, a series of points. It's serial. So it has to go through simultaneous dimensions. This is important. The content. Experts before would look at the content. But now we're looking at the context to understand the content. And this will really be the way of how we will look at these sites that we'll be talking about much later. So we have both the content and the context. Previously, traditionally, only the experts were heard. But now, it's both the experts and the community dialoguing, conversing, engaging, to provide various levels of narratives and meanings. Object-based was really the thought before of many of our museums. But now, it's not just object, it's more of the values. What messages are you trying to say? For some, the World Heritage, it's the superlatives. But for the intangible cultural heritages, it's the representativeness, the everyday lives of the people. When you look at all this movement, previously it was always the contention between heritage and development. It has now moved into heritage in development. And now it's always the talk on heritage-driven development. So you can see here that these movements would tell us more or less how we will look at our sites now compared to how we looked at our sites before. Next slide. When you see this object, manunggol jar, tausog da sunduk, these are pre-colonial objects. This is Lipuan Point. This is the site where this manunggol jar was discovered. And the manunggol jar is a secondary burial jar. So it dates back to around the 7th to the 8th century BC. Now, this is secondary burial jar. It is earthenware. Look at the motifs, the waves, and on top of the jar is the lid. The lid, there is a boat. And on the boat, you have two anthropomorphic figures. One figure has his hand over his chest. That's the dead person. Then the other figure is actually a boatman. Here you see, when you travel to the afterlife previously, there has to be somebody with you. You have a companion. And I think for many of us in the Philippines, we are very familiar with this. Whenever we attend a wake, there's somebody beside the coffin who's not allowed to sleep overnight. That's the companion of the soul. So it is a mortal sin for somebody sleeping right beside that particular coffin or during the wake. So what do you see here? This jar was positioned on a promontory on the precipice of these cliffs. And when you look at it, you have the motifs of nature, the waves. You have the transport into the afterlife. You have your companion. I think for Filipinos, we always commune. We need our companion. Even for the ladies, when they go to the washroom, they need a companion. They always love to go all at the same time. Okay? So please note of these little elements, and we will try to weave through different sites with commonalities related to these particular elements. Next slide. This is a dap-ay. This is a meeting place, of the people in the Cordilleras. The setting of every village is right smack in the middle of a terraced landscape. The rice terrace of the Cordilleras is an interaction of nature and man. how man has carved out that whole mountain and how the mountain has impacted on the lives of man. So nature is very important. The dapay is the setting for many of the discussions of the elders with the young, for many of the important decisions that they had to undertake on how they will manage the landscape, the water, the weather, the plantation, all of their life systems. So this is the rice terraces, and this is a World Heritage Site here in the Philippines. Next slide. This is a typical plaza. This is Bolhoon Church, one of the most breathtaking churches in Cebu. It's in a cove, one of the most complete ensemble of a church, of a convent. You also have the fortification, you have the cemetery, but please note this has a very high, not just religious significance, but also archaeological significance. This church is very high in terms of the convergence of people. But prior to that, traditionally, churches were also built on top of old settlements. This has an archaeological excavation that proved that the church was placed on top of another village, a pre-colonial village, and that pre-colonial village produced certain high valuable sources of information, particularly also the afterlife. No? So pre-colonial people would also have the production of the pottery, the trade wares, the beads, meaning by this time, pre-colonial people would really afford the dead, that when they go to the afterlife, they will have to be provided as well. No? So here you see the convergence. It's not just the convergence of people in the church. It's the convergence of two dimensions of the present and after that dimension of time. Next slide. This is the Metropolitan Theater of Manila. This was a breathtaking theater that was built in 1921 by Juan Arellano. So this is located at the terminus of one of the major avenues. This is the punctuation point for the City Beautiful of Burnham during the American period. Why is this very important? This is convergence of ideas, the convergence of Art Deco movement and how it was translated in the Philippine language. This is the convergence of many of the national artists of music, Nicanor Abelardo, of painting, Fernando Amarsolo, of our great dancers, Leonor Orosa Goquinco. The foremost national artists of the Philippines converged in this space up until the after the 1950s, when it was bombed, and it was rehabilitated in 1973. So this is located as a punctuation point. The river of Pasig is right here. So there was already that dialogue with that riverscape and even the landscape. Next slide. This is the Philippine International Convention Center, part of the CCP complex. This site was a reclaimed site in 1968. No? But please note, the whole movement was brutalist. This was adopted by Leandro Locsin, but that brutalism was made light. Look at the floating image. And when you go inside, there's that dialogue between the concrete and the wood. You have that dialogue of the Philippine genius of national artists and the genius of the architect. So this is a very popular converging point for international organizations, for graduations, even for assemblies and fellowships. Next slide. This is EDSA. EDSA was a convergence point for 1986 People Power Revolution, and recently the 1 trillion mark because of the heavy corruption that was revealed by the recent news in government. What I'm trying to say here, this is a very high symbolic significance that anyone who would say, let's go to EDSA, they know exactly what they're going to. No? So there are places that they do not conjure the exact physical site. They conjure the symbolic, what is iconic in the memory of that particular site. If you go through all of this, next slide, This matrix convergence would provide us value-defining spaces for pre-colonial. The form is the coastline. But when you look at the Manunggol jar, the motif is nature and man. The lever is life and the afterlife. Who were the actors? There was the soul and the boatman, and the setting is the cave in the sea. If you look at the values, we are very much towards environment. There will always be that idea of the two-dimensionality in our relations. There's also that relational part, the soul and the boatman. We always relate, and even the contact points. Many of our sites, our leveling, there's always that contact. No? Next, indigenous. Please go back. If you look at the Dapayan, there's always the landscape, environment again, the people and the deities, the elders and the youth, the Mombak and the community, the mountain, the rivers, and the rice terraces. They still have that commonality and values of the environment, two-dimensionality, relationality, and contact points. This church, what are the motifs? So natural materials, the coral stone of the church, and the construction of man of the church, the leveling, the human and the divine, the indigenous and the Christian. Who are the actors? The clergy and the laity, and the setting is the church plaza, the land and the sea. There's always that environment, the two-dimensionality of your relation. It's relational. You must be able to have that contact, both in environment, both with the people. Next slide. You also have the American period Met Theater. What were the motifs? You have the natural and the geometric. The leveling, you have the talents and the spirit, the local and the Art Deco movement. Actors were the artists in the audience. The setting was a theater in the plaza by the river. Again, the environment, two-dimensional relations, and the contact points. Marcos era, that's the PICC. It's a reclaimed land right at the edge of that particular horizon around the boulevard. So motifs were the greens and the geometric, the massiveness and the lightness, the light and the shadow, the wood and the concrete. There's always that dialectics, no? And the actors were the leaders and the audience, the set is PICC. So still, they resonate. That relationality, the environmental dimension, the two ones, and even the ones in EDSA. What I'm trying to tell you is this. When you look at these relations, these patterns, the culture provided and afforded a set of values that resonated relationship to our history, relationship to our society, relationship to our environment. This made up the Filipino set of values. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Hold your questions for the Q&A that will happen towards the end of our panel. I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Dr. Filomeno Aguilar, or Sir June Aguilar, is Professor of History and the Assistant Vice President for Research and Creative Work and Innovation at Ateneo de Manila University. His body of work focuses on international relations, history, and peasant studies, and he has published many notable titles on these areas of study, including Maalwang Buhay, Family, Overseas Migration, and Cultures of Relatedness in Barangay Paraiso. He was chief editor of Philippine Studies, Historical and Ethnographic Viewpoints from 2003 until 2021. His most recent book is Jose Rizal, Nationhood and the Anti-Colonial Imagination. Let us give a big round of applause to Sir June Aguilar.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Can I actually have a clicker? Oh, I just have to, because I have within the, it's all right. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being in this panel. I'm going to speak on migration and how some of the traditional values are actually implicated in the process of migration, global migration. Yes, so I will be speaking from the book Maalwang Buhay, and roughly Maalwang Buhay is roughly translated as a satisfactory life, an improved life, This is from the Tagalog spoken in the area south of Manila, in the Batangas area. We did an ethnographic study in an upland community in Batangas, which we call Barangay Paraiso. That is not the real name of that barangay. And we shall see, because I have no clicker, is that it really focused on the family, and the family is always the reason why people migrate. It is also the reason why people stay. So the family is so central in either type of argument. But what is interesting about this place, this upland community, is that there has been a tradition of internal migrations. From around the 1950s, because of their poverty, people from that upland community have been traveling around the Philippines, selling whatever goods they could sell. So there was already a lot of internal migration. By the 1960s, the men in the community were going to Manila to work as construction workers. So we cannot see international migration simply as occurring out of the blue. But in this community, there was already this tradition of internal migration. Then followed by the 1990s, there was now this huge rise in international migration. So one aspect that we are looking at in this study confronts this question. What aspects of culture make it possible for parents, especially both parents, to be physically separated from their young children, sometimes for many years because of overseas work? What are the concepts of childhood in Barangay Paraiso that, along with other factors, make the separation of parent and child culturally acceptable? So I'm not speaking here about Filipinos who have migrated to Germany with their spouses and with their children. But in this community, there were many parents who left behind their children to be cared for by the grandparents or by the aunts or some other relative. What makes that culturally acceptable in that upland community? And here, to be able to answer this question, we draw from the idea of what is the concept of childhood in the Philippines. And one study by the anthropologist Michelle Rosaldo, who studied the Ilongot, a community that was traditionally, until the early 1900s, was a head-hunting community. Among the Ilongot, one's character or one's heart, quote-unquote, is actually shaped by knowledge. But this is not a Western concept of knowledge, but the idea that knowledge shapes the heart and knowledge shapes your emotions is so central to the concept of personhood and to what a child is or is not. So a child, therefore, is someone who does not yet have knowledge to shape the heart. Among the Tagalog in Batangas, we discovered that in maalwang buhay, yes, in Batangas, what is crucial is they say that a child can be left behind because siya ay wala pang bait, that the child has no bait. We people in the other Tagalog-speaking areas, we often say mabait, but we simply mean kind. But here, to be able to say wala pang bait is actually to say that the child has no knowledge, quote-unquote. The child has no moral discretion. The child cannot make judgments of what is right and wrong. And therefore, one can leave behind a child because they have wala pa silang bait. They don't have knowledge. All that is important for the child is that they must be told by the caregiver that, look, these are your parents. They will always show the photograph. A child must be introduced to the parents repeatedly through photographs. and then through the things that the parents provide. Because what is very crucial at this stage is that the child must be provided with its physical needs, with adequate food and as the child grows older, that the parents are able to send money so that the child can go to school. So, wala pang bait. The child is not yet, does not yet have knowledge. I'm using knowledge here very roughly. And because wala pang bait, sometimes a child will be acting like pilyo, sutil, or malikot. In other words, they can be mischievous or hard to deal with because they are said to be nagbabait. You know, they sometimes attempt to show that they have bait, but actually they have no bait. And therefore there is a need for discipline and protection, and all that the parents need to do is to provide the material needs. Next, please. So what we find actually in Batangas, and I don't know how prevalent this is in the Tagalog culture, is the concept of childhood is discontinuous. It is not a linear concept of childhood. Like in the West, the concept of childhood is cumulative. In the West, the child grows, and therefore it's a developmental concept. And whatever the child learns from young is something that adds up together until finally they reach adulthood. And so childhood is a linear, continuous process. But in this community, and probably elsewhere in the Philippines, it is not. It is a non-cumulative, non-linear view of childhood. Whatever happens when they were young does not affect what they will become when they grow older as an adult. Because finally what happens is one day they will have bait. Okay. So parental absence is justifiable, but children just need to be reminded by the caregiver, ito yung magulang mo, these are your parents, and they are the ones sending all of these things to you. Now, there is then an abrupt transition to adulthood. The abrupt transition to adulthood actually occurs, this might be strange, but it occurs when the child has its first sex and gets married. If you are married and you now engage in sex, they say you are now an adult. You are no longer a child. So before you get married, you are always walang bait. You still do not have full knowledge. You cannot make moral judgments. But once you're married, you have to perform that role of having moral discretion to look after your family. And so they say one can be lead a very wayward life, and then suddenly, poof, they're adults. You just don't know it, but they now have bait. So that is, and in a sense, this is very consistent with the Austronesian concept of personhood as continually under construction and reconstruction. And so it is a non-linear view of personhood, a non-linear view of childhood. Now, when they reach the age of adolescence, around 12 years old until they're 17 or 18, which in the West we would say, this is adolescent age, this is a difficult time. But in this community, they call it, they are now talubata. Talubata meaning they are like children, but of course they are no longer children, but they're also not yet adults. But the talubata is, as a Bicolano, because I'm not Tagalog, as a Bicolano, I had to learn all of these concepts among the Tagalog community because we don't have all of these kinds of very complex concept of personhood. That the talubata is someone that needs to be disciplined, but in the end they say, how the talubata turns out as an adult is the individual's own responsibility. It's not to be blamed. The behavior of the talubata who becomes an adult is not to be attributed to the caregiver or to the parents. It is his or her own decision. So I don't know if I have another slide. Is there another one? Okay, so in terms of transnational parenting, there are three types that scholars say. That if you are a parent, you must provide material care, moral care, and emotional care. So for the material care, they send very expensive gifts. They provide for the education of the child. Moral care is they try to discipline, but the disciplining is often transferred to the caregivers, to the grandparents who look after the child. But the emotional care, what is interesting is that traditionally, before migration overseas, people, these Tagalog people do not, and many other Filipinos, do not really we don't express our emotions in verbal terms. We may touch each other, but we don't express it verbally. But now with migration, emotional care is actually now verbalized because they need to be able, because the parents cannot touch the child. If one is in Frankfurt and your child is in Batangas, you cannot touch the child. So the transnational parenting takes on an increasingly more verbal articulation of emotion. So that is when they begin to say, oh, I love you, I will look after you. Transnational parenting becomes more dependent on words and the sending also of gifts. Next slide, please. Yes. So what is so crucial is transnational communication. Here is a photograph of a boy around, he must be around 8 years old at that time, talking to his parents who are both migrant workers in Italy. This boy was raised by his grandparents, and the grandparents have always done the role of reminding the boy, quote unquote, through photographs. And the boy also is very astute because he may have no bait, but he knows how to ask for toys and gadgets. And the parents will try to provide the expensive gadgets and toys because that is the way to express emotional care. So sometimes it's because parents are guilty that they're not there. But the whole idea is even the child knows how to negotiate with his parents in terms of asking for these gifts. Next slide. So yes, giving of expensive toys and gadgets. Now, families go through a period of reunion or reunification. Reunion happens when the parents who are based, let's say, in Rome, will go back to the Philippines, or one of them will say, okay, our children are now talubata. One of us will have to go home to the Philippines and be physically present with a child. Okay, or they may bring the child over to Italy and be together and reunify as a family. What is interesting here is that parents engage in a form of courtship. They now court their children to be able to get their emotions, and in many ways, therefore, children are shapers of adult behavior. Yes, they may not have bait, but they know how to shape the behavior of their parents. I think, is there another one?
That's the last.
That's it.
Yay.
So I end here on this point. Thank you.
So we have 10 minutes for question and answer. Please raise your hand. Yes, please. Can I give you the microphone? And those who have questions too, please prepare and compose them in your head, and so that I could call you next. Raise your hand so I know who to call next. But
Hello.
please go ahead. Yeah.
Hello, I'm RR. I'm here to consult to Sir Eric because he's my advisor. But this is more of Sir Eric with the recent pandemic, the recent earthquake. You know, the word gets thrown around and gets championed, the word resilience, on how you will be addressing the issue of the earthquake and how to reconstruct. But what can you say about the possibilities of mining like Filipino words and concepts behind them for how we are going to reconstruct our tangible heritage mostly, and the intangible heritage that comes with it? Because I'm looking at words already for concepts like guho or labi, you know, and how to mine it for us to address the issues with the earthquake and even the incoming one. Also for resilience, should we relate it with endurance and pagiging matiisin, you know? There's a universe of words we can mine for values to face the calamities.
So
we
what
have.
we'll do is we'll collect all the questions, and then I'll give the microphone to them to zone in on what they want to answer. We have a question here too. So the first one is on resilience. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Ayu. I'm from Indonesia. I have two questions for Eric Zerrudo. But before, thank you very much for the presentation. It really inspired a lot of things. First question is the cases that you present in the slide seems to be a good examples. My question is whether you think convergence always positive or always good, or there are convergence which are not positive. My second question to Filomeno Aguilar, maybe it's not really connected, but talking about this indigenous thing, I remember that there is an effort of finding an indigenous epistemology, something like that. And I remember that in the Philippines, in the 1970s, you have a psychology, Psikologiyang Filipino, and it quite some inspiration for Indonesian too. But my question is, what happened after that? And is there any other effort to have indigenization of social science? Thank you.
Is there more? Yes, please. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Bogdana from Ukraine, and my question is to Mr. Aguilar. I'm interested in the topic. This model of family is really close to Ukrainian in some regions, this distant partnership or distant family. And I'm interested if this phenomenon affects the children books, maybe plots presented there, the models of the family presented there, etc. Does it affect the culture that represents the parenthood?
So thank you. Though there are a lot already in those questions. So should I give it to you, sir, first? You can answer collectively, the things you want to zone in on the questions you heard from Ukraine, from Indonesia, and from the Philippines. Yes.
Okay, there were two questions addressed to me, and both questions I will frame it in the paradigm of third space. Third space meaning the values evolve. Very often, values are very systemic. As I told you, the cultures evolve because of our interaction with nature, with our history, and our societies. But at the same time, if you look at, particularly even the language, so they will evolve. When you look at resilience and the preponderance of catastrophes and calamities that we're experiencing now, it looks like we'll be running out of words, no? Just to address all of these realities that we're confronted with. Particularly, I think the word resilience had taken on, it's almost like a cliche. It doesn't mean anything anymore. No, we get so tired of it. The third space here is that the moment you reach that particular critical threshold, most likely you will be evolving new words. No? You have to evolve new words on what is now the sentiment, what are now the new actions, what are now the new aspirations maybe of how you evolve it. Resilience often would be dictated also by a certain framework of the way we look at authenticity in many of their churches. That's very dictated by, that's very extractive, that's very Western. But most likely, our concept of authenticity will now be very Filipino. The idea of authenticity is the authenticity of making it back, not the materiality, but the practice of building it back. That's the authentic expression. It's not the materiality of things anymore. It's not even the site. It's not even the location of the church. The one that happened in Bohol, there was the shortage of coral stone. So maybe 5 churches had really to allocate that limited resource of their coral stone. Maybe for this particular standard of the West, that's not authentic anymore. But for the Filipinos, the practice continued. The churches were rebuilt. And this will again fall anytime when there's a big, huge earthquake. So the authenticity lies already on the recycling, rebounding, reconstruction. And maybe we will need new words, no, to express that level of authenticity and expression. For the particular area of our Indonesian, this is for Kwan. Nikki, you have to answer that. And
Okay, sorry. You had a question.
for
You had a question for Sir Eric, right? On
yeah.
is convergence.
Yes, is convergence always a good thing? Again, on the paradigm, the third space, the tendency of many of these convergence, the moment there's an encounter, one will overwhelm the other. But very often there will be another form, another expression that will come out of that. No? So some will be good, some will be bad. But I think the mutation, no, of that encounter will allow for many of the stronger elements really to survive, the attributes. No, it will have another expression, most likely.
I'd like to invite national artist for film, Kidlat Tahimik. Please come and join the panel.
Tan 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 taran, tan 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 taran, tan 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 tan, tan 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 taran, tan 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 taran, tan taran, tan tan taran, tan 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 tan. And now, having completed the requirements for a PhD in blockbuster filmmaking, the University of Hollywood hereby confers this doctorate summa cum laude to Kidlat Tahimik. After 20 years now, I have my passport to livelihood. I can return to my village in Ifugao, and we will start livelihoods. We will start jobs. We will make Mother Lily run for her money, but we have first to start also modernizing. Yes, and before I left, the University of Hollywood also found me funding for my dissertation film, Sex in the Terraces. Rice terraces, 3,000 years. Hindi na nagbabago. Hasn't changed at all. Mama. Good to see you. You're rewarded for 20 years of planting and harvesting. Now you don't have to go a single day to do harvest, because now we will bring change. We will create livelihoods. Ma, on the trip, on the plane, my seatmate was a producer, said, we're going to do film, Rambo in the Terraces. Wow. You don't know Rambo? Rambo. Imagine our rice terraces. Green with newly planted rice. And then, helicopter. Slowly, our green terraces turning red, terrace by terrace. Hollywood ketchup. I learned all the tricks, Mama. And we can do all kinds of things. Why are you so sad? Your balikbayan's on his back. Said that 20 years ago, I would come back and do films about the epic footwood music of our Ifugaos. That I would make films about Kinabian, the goddess of the wind, who blew away the Western influence. That I would make films about the great engineers who built our rice terraces 1,000 years ago without a single cent of U.S. aid. Mama, who will buy tickets for those films? Well, maybe some of them. Mama, ako nawawala. I have not lost my connection to our culture. Don't despair, Mama. I still know our beat. Malawang na ako sa Hollywood. I have gotten rusty. Wait, okay. Focus. Breathe. Concentrate. Okay. Forget about Rambo in the terraces. Forget about sex in the terraces. Forget about Godzilla in the terraces. Let's do our own films about our own culture. About our medicinal plants. We don't have to go to Big Pharma. We have to do our own indigenous ways. Wait. How did we tell stories in the past? Papa Lopez, no, yeah. Ano? How did we tell stories without those reflex cameras of Germany or the Sony of Japan? Ah, we did it our own way. Told our stories with our own alternative technology. Smile, you're on bamboo camera. Smile, you're on bamboo camera. Okay, tomorrow we're going to have auditions for the story about Inabian, goddess of the wind, who blew away Western influence. Who will play? Who will play Inabian, goddess of the wind? Ready? Please come tomorrow and come topless. Okay, mabuhay ang mga kwentong indigenous. Long live our long indigenous stories. Long live our indigenous stories. We're not the alternative. We are the mainstream. Mabuhay ang mga
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Kidlat Tahimik. I know he needs no introduction, but for those who are our friends from other countries, he's a national artist, independent filmmaker who primarily advocates for indigenous culture amidst neo-colonialism. He has been dubbed the father of Philippine indie cinema and was conferred the prestigious Order of National Artists in the field of film and broadcast arts. He is also a hands-on artist. There's proof of that. He directs, produces, and even acts in his films. Beyond filmmaking, he also designed and built the Ililikha Artist Village in Baguio, flaunting Cordillera culture through its in-house cinema, food community, and even flower shop. I was shocked because he just did his own commencement exercise, not part of the script, but the word commencement is perfect because it means the end for graduation, but it also means the start. I apologize for those who ask questions because this panel has to come to an end. There are performances still to come from other artists, and we do have to respect the artists who prepared for this too. May I invite the speakers to please just go directly to the people. Sir June, our Ukrainian friends have a question. Sir Eric, there's a question on resilience, and there's also a question from Indonesia still on convergence. Sir June, she also asked about what has happened since Psikolohiyang Filipino. So I've summarized all your homework. Please go to our, please go to all the people.